between the Enlightened Being and what happens further into the meditation, yes, and then
I cried a lot today.
Oh,
yeah.
I told you that.
that was the beginning of my That was like, when did you tell me that? So,
I have a big cry.
okay.
It was like £8 a table, my friend. But I think we probably got a bit too much.
I'll get you to another.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
As long as it works out.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Maybe whatever you'd rather. I say add some of those friendships, but like, so like, yeah.
So a really warm welcome to Sigala. Lovely to see you. And we're continuing our theme, encounters with enlightenment. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the Sigala Sutta. So the full name is the Sigalovada Sutta, which is often called the Discourse to Sigala. Sigala is our main character tonight, along with the Buddha. And Avada can mean advice, so you could also think of it as the Sutta of advice to Sigala. So I'm just going to give a little bit of context and background first, and this is from a commentary from Buddhaghosa. I recently saw that there's now seminar material available, so a few order members and Bhante Sangha are actually to discuss this sutta, and it's, I think, 102 pages, if I remember correctly. Really interesting. Didn't manage to read all of it, but there was lots of little interesting kind of contextual gems I got from that, so I'm going to bring a few of those into it. So yes, this comes from Buddhaghosa's commentary. So Sigala, our main character, he was the son of a Buddhist family living in Rajagaha, which is in northern India. And his parents were really devout, loyal followers of the Buddha. But Sigala himself was quite indifferent to religion. His parents couldn't persuade him to come with them when they went to visit the Buddha or to hear talks from the Buddha or his disciples. Sigala thought it was practically useless to pay visits to the Sangha. And the reason for that is because he thought such visits might entail material loss. What Sigala was concerned with was material prosperity. Spiritual progress didn't really mean anything to him. It wasn't in his interest. He would say to his father, "I will have nothing to do with the monks. Paying homage to them would make my back ache and my knees stiff. I'd have to sit on the ground, and I would soil and dirty and ruin my clothes sitting on the ground. Why would I do such a thing? And then, if I did come and make conversations with them, well, then I'd get to know them and I'd have to invite them to come to my house and give them offerings. So one would only lose by engaging in this activity." So this was Sigala's point of view. This exclusively material view of religion. From his point of view, to engage with the Buddha or the Sangha would mean material loss. So that's the bit of context going into this sutta, into this story. So we start in our traditional way. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Buddha, the Exalted One, was dwelling in the bamboo grove in the squirrel sanctuary near Rajagaha. One morning, he set out walking on his way to collect alms. And at that time, a young man called Sigala, a householder's son, had also risen early in the morning, and the two were to cross paths. The Buddha came upon Sigala, who was out in the street, with wet clothes and wet hair, and he was on his knees, bowing in each direction. He had joined his hands, and he was bowing to the east, the south, the west, the north, the nadir, which means below him, and the zenith, above him. The Buddha watched him, and he asked, "Young householder, what is it you're doing?" And Sigala answered that his father, whilst on his deathbed, had asked him, "Sigala, will you pay respect to the 6 directions every morning?" And because Sigala had loved and respected his father, he wanted to do what he was asked. And so this was what he was doing. So just to come out of the story for a moment. So as you hopefully have gleaned, Sigala is doing something out of duty to his father, but he's not doing it in terms of the potential meaning and significance it could have. He's doing it in a very mechanical, dry way, day after day. He is engaging in it to some extent, but not in a way that means something to him. Back into the story. The Buddha looks at Sigala kindly. "But you know, that's not really at all how we worship the 6 directions." Sigala says, "Oh, I've been doing it wrong. Then tell me what I should do." The Buddha says, "Well, young householder, listen, and apply your mind well, I shall speak." "Very good, Venerable Sir," responded young Sigala. So here's the start of the teaching the Buddha gives to Sigala. A noble disciple gives up 4 corrupt deeds, doesn't do bad deeds on 4 grounds, and avoids 6 drains on wealth. When they've left these 14 bad things behind, they have the 6 directions covered. They're practicing to win in both worlds, and they succeed in this world and the next. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. So the Buddha, as you might know, he would very much give an individual set of teachings to the individual before him or to the beings before him. So the Buddha has come across young Sigala, he's taking him in his awareness, and he's aware Sigala is not, so far, has not been interested in the spiritual life, he's not a follower of the Buddha, and yet he is willing to engage in this activity day after day. What the Buddha knows of Sigala is that he is interested in material prosperity, worldly success, money, and status. So there are a lot of numbers in that list I've just said, which is quite classic in suttas. But you might have noticed this thing about avoiding the 6 drains on wealth. And I think that really got Sigala's ear. I think that really brought him in. So, there's a little bit of groundwork first. What are the 4 corrupt deeds, or another translation would be the 4 vices? I wondered actually, you might be able to give them to me. They're pretty obvious. What do you reckon? What are the 4 vices? Say it again. Greed. Yes, it's a behaviour based on greed. So what would be a behaviour based on greed that is dumbed down? Stealing, fantastic. So stealing is one of the 4 vices. Killing, fantastic. Obviously not really. So it's the first 4 precepts. It's stealing, killing, adultery, and lying. These are the 4 vices. So the little verse in the Sutta is quite sweet. It says, firstly, Sigala, the 4 vices in conduct to eradicate, killing, stealing, lying, and adultery. These 4 evils the wise never praise. And then you might remember he said, don't do bad deeds on 4 grounds. I'll just say this in short. So it's around not committing harmful action, and it's how. And the answer is not to let yourself be led by desire, anger, ignorance, and fear. So there's this little warm-up in the Sutta. So he's got Sigala's attention. He starts with some basic dharma, some ethics, and then he talks about avoiding these 6 drains on wealth, which to me is very much a skillful means, a way of getting this particular individual to sort of listen, to open his ears and listen. So here is a list of 6 from the Buddha on how to avoid dissipating what money you have. 1. So this is ways you would dissipate your money, to be clear. 1. Indulgence in intoxicants which cause infatuation and heedlessness. 2. Sauntering in streets at unseemly hours. 3. Frequenting festivals. 4. Indulgence in gambling. 5. Association with evil companions. And 6. The habit of idleness. So these are 6 drains on your wealth. And he goes on to say, Sigala, there are consequences to one's actions. And then there's this interesting bit of the Sutta where he goes into each of those 6 points and he opens them up to explain what would be the consequences of indulging in each of those. For time, I won't go into every single one of those sub-lists, but I'm going to go into a few because I enjoyed them a lot. So, if you were to indulge in intoxicants which cause infatuation and heedlessness, what would be the consequences? As well as loss of wealth, there would be an increase in quarrels, a susceptibility to disease, earning an evil reputation, shameless exposure of the body, and weakening of one's intellect. So these are the consequences of indulging in intoxicants. Interesting. What about if you were to indulge in gambling? Well, the winner would beget hate, the loser would grieve for lost wealth, there would be a loss of wealth, their word would not be relied upon in a court of law, and they would be despised by friends and associates. And what would be the evil consequences in being addicted to idleness? Well, it says, he does no work, saying, 1, that it is extremely cold. 2, that it is extremely hot. 3, that it is too late in the evening. 4, that it is too early in the morning. 5, that he is extremely hungry. Or 6, that he is too full. Living in this way, he leaves many duties undone. New wealth he does not get, and wealth he has acquired dwindles away. So now Sigala is fully engrossed. The Buddha has spoken to him where he is at, where he was at that time, as this young man concerned with material gain. And he's clearly spelt out what he wanted to hear. And what he's begun to do is weave in what Sigala needs to hear. Teachings around karma, actions having consequences, teachings around mental states that result from our actions. And what I feel this means at this point in the sutta is Sigala is now truly receptive to the teachings that are to follow. So at this point, the Buddha goes on to teach Sigala the difference between fake friends and good-hearted friends. So now we're sort of talking about people in his life. We're going towards people for this part. Sigala, you should recognize these four enemies disguised as friends: the taker, the talker, the flatterer, and the spender. So the taker being someone who asks a lot but gives as little as possible, is only generous when they want to get something for themselves and just the bare minimum of duties back, or would do something out of fear but not out of actual open-hearted giving. So that's the taker. The talker, someone who makes you believe they are highly generous by talking a lot about their generosity, but whose words mean nothing, and when you need their help is always having a crisis of their own. The flatterer, they exist only to agree with you and support everything you do, whether it is good or bad, or skillful or unskillful. They praise you to your face, but they put you down behind your back. And then the spender, or the partner in crime, someone who encourages you to do all that is harmful for you, comes with you drinking, gambling and partying, and helps you to keep your bad habits alive and strong. So then this little poetic verse from within the sutta I'll just read out. One friend is all take, another all talk. One's just a flatterer, and one's a comrade who spends. An astute person understands these four enemies for what they are, and keeps them at a distance, as they'd shun a risky road. If you are wise and want to be happy, you will stay away from these types of so-called friends. The words of such people might bring you temporary pleasure, but their actions will only bring you into pain and sadness the longer you stay in their company. So be sure to choose good friends, kind and good people who want to help you from the heart. And then I'll just draw out a little bit from this section. So there's quite a large section, which is lovely, about good friends. So a little bit about that. So these are people who are always there to help you, who look out for you when you are weak and in trouble, who are generous, who is a true friend because they come to support you when you are afraid. They don't talk about your problems with other people. They don't abandon you. They're full of compassion for you. And this is maybe my favourite part of this. They're happy for you when life goes well for you, and they don't ever laugh when things go wrong for you. They speak of you with kindness to other people. You think of a lot of those people right here, so thank you for being such good friends. When you find such people, hold on to them and protect them with all your strength. These friends are the most valuable things you can find in life. So all of this has been leading to this sort of heart of this sutta around what we saw when the Buddha came across Sigala when he was bowing in the 6 directions. So all of that leads to this part of the sutta now, which I say is the most famous bit, this bit we're going into now. So the Buddha. Now I will tell you what is really meant by paying respect to the 6 directions. When we say the 6 directions, we are talking about the 6 kinds of relationships we should guard more closely than our most precious possession. When we say the 6 directions, we are talking about the 6 kinds of relationships we should guard more closely than our most precious possession. Sigala, recognize the East as your parents, the South as your teachers, the West as your partner and children, the North as your friends and colleagues. the nadir as your employees or people who support your life, and the zenith as your spiritual teachers. So what the Buddha is starting to draw out at this point in the story is, instead of bowing to these 6 directions in this sort of quite mechanical, habitual way, just out of duty to his father, he could be taking part in a daily practice where he bows to these 6 directions, but in each direction brings to mind these different groups of people in his life. And in doing this, it would be an opportunity to cultivate metta for these people and to experience gratitude for the benefits he has received from them. And so his morning daily practice could become a touchstone practice for perfuming his mind with positive emotion. So for us, we could bring these groups of people to mind during our metta bhavana practice. Or if actually you feel like you need or want more reverence in your life, you could do it in this way. You could do it by literally kneeling and bowing as you bring to mind these different groups of people. So this is just a little visual reminder of these different directions and the different groups that have been attributed to each one. So for this part of the talk, I'll say a little of what the Buddha said for each of these directions, for each of these groups of people. And I'll share a little bit of that sort of my personal commentary on some of these as well. And yeah, hopefully there'll be some of this, if not a lot of it actually, that you could well bring into perfuming your practice of metta or your practice of gratitude. So in the Sutta, it starts in the East, so with our parents. So a little bit of what the Buddha says. He says, you should look after your parents and protect your relationship with them. Support them as they have supported you throughout your childhood. Do your duty to them with compassion. So in each one there's this list of these beautiful qualities that could be drawn out and how you could bring these people to mind. And then it ends with this refrain. And that's how the Eastern Quarter is covered, kept safe, and free of peril. So yeah, a little bit from me. I'm very aware that the relationship between parents and children in Indian culture is really different, typically, to in Western culture. And it particularly would be true 3,000 years ago, even more so. But I really recognise this idea of duty really deeply from my own conditioning. And I'm also aware that not everyone listening will have a straightforward relationship with their parents. So I think when considering this direction, the East, if it's quite complicated, you might choose to think of, well, who are the people in your life who most acted as parents to you? So it doesn't have to be literally your parents, but who was in that role for you and who means a lot in that way? Who did support you as you grew up, and who can you bring to mind and has that sort of quality to it? And something I personally appreciate is Sangha Rakshita did talk a few times about the importance of having, if possible, a harmonious relationship with your parents, which meant a lot to me. It's been really important to me. So then turning to the South, your teachers, so the Buddha says, show your teachers respect and show interest in what they teach. More specifically, one should go to their classes, listen with all your attention to their instructions, and be willing to learn. You should be grateful to your teachers and show your gratitude by serving them well. And that is how the Southern Quarter is covered, kept safe, and free of peril. So in this direction, it's not really spiritual teachers, that's coming a bit later. It's more like you could think of your school teachers, lecturers if you have them, trainers in different ways, maybe music teachers, language teachers. It's anyone sort of out of the spiritual realm, but people who've had an impact on you and have helped you with your education in one way or another. And I find it is a really rich area for gratitude, particularly because you can go back to when you were very little and just think of all these different people who've taken that role in your life, who have taught you and what they've given you. So I think it's a really rich way into gratitude, thinking of your teachers. So then we go to the west, your partner and or children. I'll just say a little bit from this section from the Buddha, but it draws out respecting and valuing your partner, being faithful, being appreciative, and being kind to your partner and children. And a couple of points here. One is that, again, the Buddha was talking to Sigala particularly when the Sutta, where the Sutta comes from, and Sigala was a husband and father. But don't worry if you don't have a partner or children. It's just sort of why it's in the traditional form, because it came from this particular teacher. But if you don't have a partner or children, that's absolutely fine. It just means you have more energy for these different directions. If you do have children, in Bante's commentary, well, it was in the seminar, but I noticed a part where he drew out that our first duty towards our children is to bring them up ethically, restrain them from evil and encourage them to do good, which just really struck me. And then we move to the north, our friends and colleagues. So from the Buddha, to keep our relationship with friends and colleagues peaceful and secure, towards them you should be both generous in your actions and kind in your words. Be honest with them. And there was this part where it said, not using tricky words, which I liked. And that is how the northern quarter is covered, kept safe and free of peril. And then, in this sort of downward direction. So, again, traditionally, it was put as people who work for you. So again, for Sigala, he had servants at that time in India and had people working for him. I think a good reinterpretation of this would be to think of it as people who support our life. So there's so many people who, we're all so interconnected and so many people do such beautiful roles that support each other. A few examples I started to think of would be people who grow food, so farmers, bus drivers, doctors, nurses. I thought it would be a nice opportunity to draw you out a little bit. So any people who have supported your life, like groups of people, would you be able to say anything? I'll repeat them for the recording. Shop cashiers, lovely, thanks. Yeah. Optometrists. Social care and carers, thank you. Yeah. People out to the bins, thank you. Yeah. Tradespeople. Yeah, that's, yeah. I'm gonna wait for one more. Opticians. Brilliant. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, so again, a really rich area for gratitude. So people who support our lives. And then in the upper direction, spiritual teachers and spiritual guides. So a little bit from the Buddha. By loving deeds of body, speech, and mind, by not turning them away at the gate, and by providing them with material needs. So these were some of the methods in which you can sort of dote on and show some reverence to your spiritual teachers. Loving deeds of body, speech, and mind, not turning them away, and providing them with material needs. So the Buddha is saying we should respect and look after all of these people who surround us in our lives. Because when you do so, it's like you're putting a safeguard around yourself in every possible direction. So we've gone from Sigala just bowing to the different directions, not particularly knowing why, to the Buddha teaching him and showing him, if you bring to mind your spiritual teachers, the people who support your life, your parents, your teachers, your partner and children, and your friends, if you bring them to mind every day and dwell on them and with them, this is what will bring you safety. This is what will make this practice something that's transformative. So this is nearing the end of the sutta. So this is the last little bit. When this was said, Sigala said to the Buddha, "Excellent, sir, excellent. As if you were righting the overturned or revealing the hidden or pointing out the path to the lost. or lighting a lamp in the dark so people with clear eyes can see what's there. The Buddha has made the teaching clear in many ways. I go for refuge to the Buddha, to the teaching, and to the mendicant Sangha. From this day forth, may the Buddha remember me as a lay follower who's gone for refuge for life. It's very moving that that Sigala ends up becoming a follower of the Buddha. I find that really moving. So this story, this sutta, the Sigalovada sutta, I think it's a beautiful example of, the Buddha gives a teaching to who's in front of him. And of this phrase, skillful means, which you might have heard before, the Sanskrit and Pali word for it is upaya. So upaya, skillful means. So it's this thing of tailoring teachings to the specific capacities and needs of the individual before you. And with Sigala, the way in was this thing of ways to avoid dissipating your wealth. And it reminded me of, like there's always these clicky things with titles like that, which don't lead to any good, but in the Buddhist case, it did lead to good. The outcome was, Sigala, the veil dropped, and he had an experience of a sort of taste of the spiritual life, and he decided to go for refuge to the Buddha. So what a powerful thing to turn around and be. And we need to be receptive if we're going to take on a teaching or teachings. And a skilled teacher like the Buddha, well, he could have an effect just with his presence as well as with his style of communication to draw out receptivity in somebody. But for us, we're not alive at the time of the Buddha, and we're alive at a time with an incredibly high amount of input, distraction, what I call clicky things, which I think is called clickbait. There's this huge and loud amount of potential distraction on our hands. And I think, therefore, it's really important we reflect actively on how we can personally cultivate more receptivity. So I'm just going to read a little bit from Sangharakshita on receptivity. Spiritual receptivity is of the utmost importance. Without it, spiritual progress simply cannot be maintained. We need to hold ourselves open to the truth as the flower holds itself open to the sun. This is what spiritual receptivity means. Holding ourselves open to the higher spiritual influences that are streaming through the universe, but with which we are not usually in contact because we usually shut ourselves off from them. We should be ready, if necessary, to give up whatever we have learned so far, which isn't easy by any means, and to give up whatever we have become so far, which is still more difficult. Yeah, so I'm going to suggest that as a question, well, for you to personally reflect on and for the groups later. How could you cultivate more receptivity in your life? And I'll give you a little freebie, which is you could take on to sit and do nothing for 15 minutes a day, say for 2 weeks, and see what happens if you do that. Another reason I love this sutta is this thing of transforming something that was, there's this phrase, a rite and ritual as an end in itself. So when you engage in a practice that isn't actually leading you anywhere, it's sort of wrapped up in itself and it's quite dead-ended. The Buddha providing the means to transform this kind of rite and ritual into something meaningful and transformative. And this can happen to all of us. I think it's important to regularly check in with your practice and see if anything slipped from being meaningful into just becoming a bit of a habit. And examples of that could be when you salute the 3 jewels, or when you chant the refuges and precepts. How is that lately? Are you in touch with what's underneath that or not? So that's something to look at. And that happens, I think, to most of us, if not all of us. It's natural, but then you can remind yourself, bring back the awareness and do something about that. It's also possible, especially if you're newer, those things, saluting the 3 jewels, chanting the refuges and precepts, they might just not have meaning for you yet. And could you bring meaning to them? So you could talk to other Buddhists, you could talk to people here, why do you engage in those practices? What does it mean to you? You can also reflect inwardly. What could it mean to me if I put my hands together and I say, I salute the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, reverence itself, or more whole. Like, what could that mean to you? You could bring in something personal there. And having explored these 6 directions, you could consider performing a kind of particular kind of metta bhavana with 6 stages. And the 6 stages are these 6 groups of people. And within that, you'll have mixed Vedana. You know, it could be in different stages. You bring to mind, what would be a good example? Well, even within your parents, potentially, or within your partner and children, friends, there could be stages where you're bringing a group of people to mind, and some people come to mind and you get that kind of pleasant Vedana, it feels easy. And some people come to mind and it's quite difficult. But just like in the usual metta bhavana, we can work with that. We can stay with that response and cultivate metta regardless. So a suggestion is you could do a 6-stage metta bhavana with these groups of people. Or you could do a writing exercise. You could write out the headings of these 6 categories of people with the directions if you want for fun. And then you could just do some writing. You could think of groups of people, like with the people who support your life. You could do the gratitude exercise thing where you just write out as many people as you can think of. The Pali word for gratitude is Katanyata, and the meaning is knowledge of benefits received. So gratitude doesn't always have to feel warm or particularly pleasant. If you start to cultivate and turn your mind to benefits you've received, that is sort of touching into it. It will likely become warm and positive in my experience, but it's okay if it doesn't start that way. It can kind of come later. And finally, I want to say a little bit about bowing, because I thought this talked about the 6 directions, because this thing of bowing, you know, what happened at the start and how it was transformed at the end means a lot to me. And I just think personally, I find reverence and bowing a really beautiful thing. For lots of reasons. I think something about the humility to know that, there are wiser beings than me and I will bow to them. Whether that's people that you know or whether it's like an image of a Buddha who's representing something. I find that beautiful. But, and I've talked about this before, but I'll say it again. There's this beautiful film called Walk With Me around Thich Nhat Hanh. And there's this scene in the film, Benedict Cumberbatch is the narrator, and it intersperses these scenes of nature with these scenes of people practicing the Dharma. It shows ritual, it shows ceremonies. And there's this moment where it goes between these scenes of some people making offerings at a shrine, so lighting candles, bowing, making offerings. And then it goes to a scene of this young stag in a meadow bowing to eat the grass. And the mirroring between the stag bowing and the people bowing just really gets it for me. So if you've not seen that film, it's really beautiful. Walk With Me. It's really cool. So I'm going to come to a close. Some thoughts for you to take away would be, yes, 1, how can you cultivate more receptivity? 2, do you want to give this a try? Do you want to try a metta bhavana with these 6 groups of people or a writing exercise? Is that something you'd like to try? And 3, what is your relationship to bowing and reverence at the moment? So we'll head to our groups now. So let's see if I can do them. So if you want to be in a men's group, you could head to the Red Shrine room. If you want to be in a women's group with me, you could come to the bookshop. If you'd like to be in a mixed group, you could stay over here. And if you are relatively new and you've been in the green room with Paranita, you could head there. Enjoy your groups.